agenda and its implications for the borough's future financial health. Councillors, residents and officers, today is a significant day in our council's history, as our administration, elected in May 2023, delivers on the key commitment to bring transparency to the council's finances from the chaos we inherited. Just to start, a reminder of the journey to this point. This council was debt-free in 2015. During 2016, spurred on by the National Party and the former MP, the Conservatives bought substantial numbers of properties across a range of sectors with a view to raising income from them to support services to counter reductions in real terms funding from their own party's central government. Most controversial were the investments of what we now today call the Square and the former House of Fraser building for a total of 113 million. The last of these was done with 3 signatures and a justification of 1 page of A4 to spend 18.5 million of residents' money, which is today, 8 years on, almost to the day, worth less than nothing. Overall, the property and land investments have been devalued by around 10 million a year since 2016, or £252 per household per year, a devastating outcome for so many caused by so few. As an example of the mindset within the local Conservative group, and contrary to the business case signed off by the council for the Square, the debt taken was not locked in at 2.19%, but all of it was allowed to float on a short-term loan basis at the mercy of the financial markets, until some 50 million was in 2021 and 22 at the substantially higher rate of 2.73%, which residents will be liable to pay off for another 37 years, probably longer than a functioning asset life. Also, at the same time, there was no long-term plan and allocation of funding for regeneration or maintenance works to make best use of the asset. This meant an already ageing asset was purchased with no plan in place to restore it beyond a smattering of patchwork actions taken when emergencies demanded, and as we have seen with buckets galore since. Yet another multi-million-pound project this administration is having to urgently address, like the decaying car parks. Throughout the majority of this period, the same local Cavalier group failed to put in place draft annual accounts, whilst their national friends oversaw the destruction of the Audit Commission, putting in place a dysfunctional private sector service, leading to the last audit accounts for this council being the financial year of 2018-2019, and our administration taking over with 4 years of missing accounts. This is simply something the private sector would not accept without striking off the company directors, something the residents later did. So what have we done to address the inherited situation and our commitment to residents to sort the chaos out? Firstly, we have published all the documents available in the council relating to the controversial Camberley retail property investments in September 2023 to ensure full transparency for residents. We also took the opportunity at that time to highlight the ongoing real risk to the council financial position mid-term due to Putin's illegal war and, yes, Truss's mini-budget due to high inflation and interest rates. Our former MP stated just this week that the economics of the mini-budget were catastrophic. At last, something politically I can agree with him on, especially for this council. Secondly, noting the inherited accounts backlog and the desire to move to a business partner model to support council service leaders, we invested heavily in the finance team, both building capability and capacity in November 2023. Thirdly, we unusually and very publicly amended our own budget in February 2024 to note the remaining uncertainties and genuine concerns we had about the fundamental status of the council's finances. These were the actual opening usable reserve balance at the 31st of March 2023, e.g. just before we took on leadership of the council, the property valuation status and associated financial accounting of the property portfolio, the historical minimum revenue provision, e.g. the amount of money set aside to pay back the original loans, the appropriateness of the unwinding of the offshore Jersey Property Trust relating to the structure of the of the 2016 Square purchase. So briefly, where are we today? After a lot of diligent work from officers, and thank you, executive members, particularly Councillor McIntyre, and other administration members, including a many lost night's sleep myself, the finance team is now properly resourced and continuing its business partner change journey. The draft accounts are up to date, including 23-24, which covers the last inherited Conservative set budget, so we have a better idea of where the real, brackets, non-cash-based reserves balance stands. Engagement is proceeding well with the newly appointed external auditor, Grant Thornton, though according to them we still won't have full assurance of our accounts for a couple of years. However, confidence will grow year on year. Officers have addressed our concerns on current property valuation processes, as well as historic and current minimum revenue provision. We are up to date and compliant. Third-party professional financial advisors have confirmed the unwinding of the Jersey Property Trust appears appropriately done and should not place the Council at risk from HMRC compliance action. We are assured by this outcome. Having actively stimulated and supported the completion of these actions, as critical friends to the professional officers, in line with our commitments to residents to bring transparencies to the Council's finances, it gives me personally no joy whatsoever that the picture is bleak, as we as Liberal Democrats expected, but the local Conservatives repeatedly denied, as it brings uncertainty to dedicated council staff and residents alike that depend on our statutory and discretionary services. What I can assure everyone about is this: our administration and all its members takes its responsibilities extremely seriously, and we will work with the committed senior officers and their teams to work through how we deal with these challenges while securing the best we can for residents, particularly those that need our support most. Councillors, residents, officers, and Leanne, thank you for your patience. The mishandled property acquisitions and mismanaged finances over the long term by the Conservatives is a saga of epic proportions. Over to you now to introduce the report, please, and its implications.
Thank you, Leader. And now DB1. Right, so this is the financial monitoring report for Q2, which ended on the 30th of September. The report shows how the Council is performing against the budget set in February with the forecast year-end position, otherwise known as the forecasted outturn. As you'll have read, the original expenditure budget was set at just over 17 million, whereas the forecasted outturn is close to 23 million, which is made up of 16.5 million on services and approximately 6 million on non-direct costs. As you'll notice, this report now covers all of the main areas in one report, so capital, revenue, treasury and reserves. And the executive are requested to resolve, to take note of the comments, resolve the predicted forecast for the full outturn, resolve the spend and commitment against the approved capital programme, the proposed reprofile of capital budgets in future years to be approved, and the proposed mitigations for addressing the in-year forecast overspend. So capital is forecasted to come in at about £10 million against the projected 16 million in the budget. This is fairly frustrating because of the lack of progress on some of the big items, but does keep the interest rate expenditure at a lower amount than budgeted in relation to the capital programme, because we don't need to convert our internal borrowing into external borrowing. So our underlying need to borrow is obviously lower than planned. The capital programme and any reprofiling into the next financial year will be brought forward in the 2025-26 budget presentation next February. Revenue budget, so that's close to a £6 million variance, with £4 million of that due to the errors in allocating the budget into the service lines. Whilst the errors are frustrating, the challenges within the finance team have been well known within this chamber, and the executive and members will remember approving the increased spend on the finance transformation programme, which the Section 151 officer requested in order to help resolve the challenges. The base budget review this year also found £400,000 worth of efficiencies, which are now baked into the amended budget. As you can see in Appendix 1, where the overruns are itemised, the true adverse variance is 800,000, with the 600,000 coming out earmarked reserves as was planned. Our revenue budget is made up of our income of 51 million, which you can see the split again in the report. And the majority of our expenditure is at 20% of is staff costs, which demonstrates how labour intensive providing our services to residents are. It's also important to note here that our ability to generate income in any of the buckets in the report is really limited, and yet our costs are increasing, and are increasing at a much higher rate than income can ever match. Our sundry debts are currently at 660,000, not 660 billion as in the report. All of these are being actively managed with both council tax and business rate collections on target for this point in the financial year. Treasury. The council has £177 million of debt financing, the majority of this having been committed since 2015. The long-term debt is nearly 98 million and written at a weighted average of 2.37%. And the short-term debt is at an average of just over 5%, which accounts for nearly £80 million. The outturn report predicts an overspend of 4 million, which we talked about above. On the other side, we have benefited from higher interest rates to the tune of 400,000 on our investors' cash, which is just over 7 million. Reserves. Well, as everyone is aware, it's often cited that our strong reserves position gives a fair amount of resilience during challenging periods. We're projecting that our usable reserves will be 22 million at the year end, a drawn reserves of 8.5 million compared to what was in the budget. If you've been back to look at what was in the budget set in February, you'd have seen that it was estimated to close at 36 million. 8 million of that actually didn't exist and has been rectified through the diligent work that the finance team have done in the financial statements, and the remainder is based on the overrun. I also want to remind everyone of what I said in February when we proposed the budget. So the reserves are not bank accounts holding liquid cash assets waiting to be spent. The reserves are IOUs where the cash has previously been spent to keep the external borrowing to a minimum. So essentially, the reserves are internal borrowing. When the cash is needed a second time, like now, the internal borrowing is reduced, so the reserve balance goes, and the external borrowing, which is now incurring interest payments, increases. So whilst we can utilise all of our reserves, that means that all our reliance on external funding for both short-term and long-term funding increases, creating a greater drain on our cash income, creating a vicious cycle, and creating more and more of a need to increase cash generation. I point this out again as a reminder to all of us and our residents that every request to spend that enters this chamber, in either an executive or at full council, increases our need to borrow, thus reducing our ability to serve our community and reducing the services that everyone, but increasingly our most vulnerable, rely on. So overall, our financial position is a challenge. This has become even clearer over the past few months with the unaudited financial statements being published, and which has given the council more clarity over the true position, with emissions being identified and fixed, greater certainty over the reserves position, and items such as MRP being thoroughly recalculated and reliable. Q2 is historically a report which ends up being a little bit worse than the final results. It gives us a picture on what will happen if measures aren't taken and helps inform the budget setting process. So at a basic level, the message from this report is simple. Income has to go up, expenditure has to go down, and that applies to all of the council services to allow Surrey Heath to be able to set a balanced budget in February. I want to say thank you to the finance team for all of their efforts getting this picture together and getting the financial statements published. I know it's been a huge task and it is appreciated. Thank you also for your work on the budget process to date. We are relying on you in the business partnering approach to work with the services throughout the council to help find the pockets of opportunity with sensible assumptions and data-backed options to provide efficient and effective services to our residents.
Thank you, Leanne. Any questions for anybody? I think Councillor White crept ahead of you, Mr. Wilson. Councillor Wilson, please. Councillor White.
I don't normally comment on this sort of thing because I don't feel qualified to. But you keep referring back to 2016. In your statement, you indicated that Michael Gove had something to do with the purchase of the square. He had absolutely nothing to do with the purchase of the square. He was never in this chamber, as you well know, and as you will comment on. Also, I think I'm the only person in this room, and I will be corrected, that was here in 2016. And the situation that was put towards us at that time indicated that if we, Surrey Heath, didn't buy the square, then it would be left to rack and ruin, because the people that owned it at the time, I believe a South African company, wanted to take their money out of it and put it into, I think, the Lexicon in Bracknell, sorry, stopped my trail then. So at that time, I would just like it put on record that I feel that I made the right decision for Camberley Town Centre. Otherwise, we'd have, you know, I know we have problems with the actual building now, but we would have had more, and it would have just been left to go to rack and ruin. At least it is maintained, and we are looking after it, and we have got shops there. And I personally feel that I made the right decision at the time, and you can go on and on and on as much as you like that it was a bad purchase. Well, that's your prerogative, but I just had to have my say.
Thank you, Councillor White. Any, Councillor Wilson, I think you were next.
Yeah, thank you for the report. There's been significant changes to the picture of the Council's finances over the last few months, and I know it's been a lot of work for the new fully resourced finance team. And as you said, we were elected when we took control of the Council last year on a promise to bring transparency to the public on this. So in September, we found out about the extra net cost of £4 million a year in interest, which had been missed. In October, the team produced the final annual draft accounts that were missing, and as Councillor McIntyre said, there is significant revaluations of the reserves and everything else in there. And tonight we've got this report, which is another about 1.4 million adverse variance. So together that highlights historic systemic failures that had gone on for years, and the new administration is ending that and bringing a clear picture to the accounts, which has got to be the first step to rescuing the Council's finances. It's a system that this current administration has, as you said, Leader, inherited from the previous one. Looking at page 15 of the report, section 1.31, under reserves, so there's a net transfer out of 8.5 million is now estimated for this year, with a closing balance of 22 million. And then the following paragraph says 13 million of that may not be available for balancing the revenue budget because it's earmarked for things like insurance reserve and SANGs. So that could potentially leave just 9 million, which is about 1 year's transfer. 8.5 is the estimate. So does that mean that potentially in a year's time after the end of this year, the reserves will be depleted? Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Wilson. The thing about predicting it now is that we can make changes. We can put in measures in place to make sure that doesn't happen. But as you rightly say, reserves can't just be created. So once they're gone, they're gone. So we're going through quite a lot, working closely with the officers to look to see what we can do immediately and what measures we need to take in the sort of short to medium term to help reduce the call on our reserves. It's not going to be easy, and there's going to be a number of painful decisions that I think need to be made, but we will make sure that there are sufficient reserves.
Just a final supplementary then. I mean, the elephant in the room is the huge amount of external debt. So, as the leader just said, it was 113 million was spent on the square and the House of Fraser building. None of us were here in 2016, but if you were here in 2016 and you could go back in time, would you make this decision that the council made then? Thank you.
I'll take that one, shall I?
You're very welcome.
Back to Councillor White's point, unless you were here, then you probably don't know exactly what you would do.
Councillor Garrett.
Firstly, thank you for your honesty, Councillor McIntyre. Crystal balls are not something that they issue, but I'm pretty sure Mr Watson has suggested on a number of occasions that a crystal ball is something that is required. First point, you make comments that you have been installing this new finance team, which I'm pretty sure that was discussed in the previous administration, and that was already being put in place. It might now be in place, but it was already being discussed at that point. The audit reports, this has been ongoing, trying to get a completed audit for a number of years, as long as I've been a councillor, from what I can remember. And what I also remember is that for the last 4 years, the administration have actually been the chairs of that committee. If they have not been able to bring in audited accounts, it's not just our fault, it's something that is a problem we know is a national problem, it's not just down to us. And I know, having spoken to Mr Watson at length in the chamber and outside, he has been giving them, the auditors, all the information they wanted, and they kept coming back for more. So it's not a lack of information, it's just, for whatever reason, the auditors were unable to complete the audit. It was not because anything was being hidden, as far as I'm aware. And I just want to go back to the last point on, well, it's not the last point, on page 22, there are, since the budget was proposed and approved, it's been possible as a result of having a restructured and fully staffed finance team to have the capacity and ability to bottom up investigate the service budgets and the detail within them, as thrown up by a number of budgetary normalities. So, double counting of grants, under budgeting of community services, and undercast of debt financing. So this is something that's been discovered suddenly within the last however long period of time. When we entered this chamber in, I think it was May or June, we were told quite quickly that you were able to see that we were in a state of bankruptcy. So I was assuming that at that point you would have been deep dived into the accounts. 18 months down the line, we're seeing this. So what I want to try and understand is what is the problem? Why are these things suddenly being found now? Is it because they have suddenly appeared? Is it because officers have only just found them? I just want to understand why that is the case, because it's not really obvious from the paper. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Garrett. I think it's a mixture of things. So obviously when we arrived last year, we worked closely with Mr Watson and went through the financial statements at that point, understood the pressures, and fairly quickly, I guess, came to the conclusion that there were financial pressures ahead, and that was quite clear, I think, for everyone. Over the course of the last, Ms Warfold arrived, I think, February, right on the budget setting day. But she has been instrumental in going through, in a really fine detail, all of the line by line of all the general ledgers and understanding exactly what is there and how things have been made up and where the errors are. And by going through that process and by producing, because the financial statements have only been produced since February, we have had more clarity and more certainty over opening balances and therefore closing balances each year. So the absolute clarity has only been able to come while that whole process has gone through. So despite the fact that there was quite a lot of evidence, and some of it anecdotal, some of it factual, until you can actually get a set of financial statements, it's really difficult to know and follow all those lines through, which is the whole reason why Grant Thornton and are worried about doing the opening balance statement, because they can't be certain, because there's no financial statements up to that point that have been audited, right? So it's a accumulation of all of those things that allow us to get to the point today where we have far more certainty over the true position.
Councillor Mulvagenen.
Beg your pardon. Councillor Garrett has already touched on the point of going bankrupt. As all of you know, I was the opposition leader at that time, If I thought this was going bust, I would have called out long time ago. I was reasonably confident the council was going to go bust. We also always had this audit problem. It has been an ongoing problem. You can look up the YouTube, and Cliff Betton was the chair, and he tried his best. I shouted at the auditors, and the COVID did not actually help the audit to complete. That's beyond our control. So we can blame the auditor. I will never blame the finance team. You say the finance team has all of a sudden appeared. No, finance team has been here from April. That team, brilliant team, have put together 3 sets of accounts, in fact, 4 sets of accounts up to now. Yes? I agree with you, Councillor McIntyre. Without opening balances, it's difficult. Now we have certainty with the opening balances. Yeah? For people to say the finance was in a mess, and the Auditor Standards Committee meeting was a shambles, where the leader turns up, Sean MacDonald turns up in your place and questions his own budget, which I find it bizarre, because that's a budget you, the Liberal Democrats, on the 23rd or 24th of February, passed. And on page 25 of your MTFS, here it is, you actually say the interest element is 5.44. Yeah? There's a 2.1, which is actually included in the budget, which means there was a shortfall of only 3.5. That did not flow through into the spreadsheet. Now, that is incompetence it's incompetence of the administration. It's blindingly obvious. On page 25, it says 5 million or 4.5. Why haven't your administration, you, not you particularly, the entire exec, followed that through into the spreadsheet? Then you could have found out the problem then. It's as if it's all new. It's not. It's there. You failed. Admit you failed. You also must admit the council has now gone bankrupt after 18 months. We are still here, and you're right. You're an accountant. Our company run companies. Yes, I know how debits and credits work. I fully understand now how the councils work. If you have a reserve, the way you have stated in page 15 of the report, yeah, if you have 22 million, if it's earmarked for 13, you got to use your imagination. And we accountants do have one. And definitely the officers who are capable will help you find that. So we are not going to go bust, even if you fail to get enough revenue from the properties. I'm not giving you a lecture, I'm making a statement and a question all at the same time. You have a problem because your team has not performed on retail. That's a fact. Your team has not performed well on car parking. These are
Councillor, can you bring this to a question, please?
Yes, I'm coming to that. You just fundamental. You don't want to listen to it, Sean MacDonald. You have to listen to it. We listen to this all day long, every day.
Councillor, bring it to a question, please. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And now I'll finish that. It's coming. It's on its way because you have to set the scene before it comes. Fundamentally, you guys have been incompetent. Don't blame the officers. Don't blame the council. You can't blame the previous administration on the acquisition of the building, da-di-da-di-da. You've been here for 18, 20 months. What have you guys actually done? That's my question. And also, can you also answer, please, on the 18-month, going bankrupt? I'm sorry. I had to get this across so that Sean MacDonald truly understands he cannot keep blaming Liz Truss and the Conservatives for all the problems.
Would you like to respond to some of that, Councillor McIntyre?
I'd love to, but I've got no idea what the question was.
Oh, okay, fine. Well, we'll move on then. Any other members' questions? Councillor Garrett.
Thank you, Leader. Hang on. Thank you, Leader. Property.
Sorry, there was a question. There's a question there. I asked, how do you guys miss the 3.1 between the 4 million and the 3.1 million in the P&L? That was the question. How did you all miss it? Was it a total incompetence or you just let it go? You all didn't read the paper. That was the question amongst all my statements.
Sorry?
I feel that maybe I'll just chip in with a few things. So the paper, I think, was clear that we signed off in terms of what the assumption was for the interest. And that wasn't carried through into the service lines. We had no visibility of that. It's a point of fact from the excellent work that Ms Worsfold has done with pulling together the accounts, that we can see that there has been underpayments year after year after year after year of interest. Thank you, Councillor, let me finish, thank you. Year after year after year, there have been problems with the interest payments. So the net result of that is there has been a drop in the reserves of 12 million. And that is something that the Conservatives are responsible for, because we inherited all of that from yourselves. It's also worthy of note, going back to your previous comments, that our former MP, thank goodness former, was in fact in charge of the auditing process for local government. So there was clearly an opportunity there for you guys to try and sort that out. But the main issue, I think, is that the previous Conservative administration got lazy and complacent. It was rash in terms of its purchases of these properties. It didn't think through the risk. It didn't put in place proper accounts. It didn't make sure that there was a capability and capacity within the finance team to manage it. And unfortunately, it's now beholden on ourselves and the current crop of officers to try and sort the mess out. So, but we'll move on from that to anybody else that. No, we'll just wait and see if anybody else got a question they'd like to ask. Please, Councillor Thorne.
Thank you, Leader. Just a point of clarification on a point you've just made, reference the auditors. I do believe that past administration tried to pass a motion in the council to write to Michael Gove at the time to request that we could look at getting new auditors. My understanding is the Liberal Democrat team voted against that motion.
Yeah, it was your own party that took apart the Audit Commission and put in place a fundamentally weakened auditing system. But let's not get hung up on the auditing. There weren't any accounts to audit because you didn't bother to do any. Councillor Garrett, please.
Thank you. I'd just like to have it known that we weren't responsible for the sinking of the Titanic. We've been blamed for everything else in the chamber this evening, so I thought I'd just throw that one in there. That's just my normal sarcastic self. I'm sorry, I apologise.
We like some humour, don't we, Sean? You carry on.
apologise.
You carry on. Let's lighten the mood because there's not going to be much light going forward.
There was one thing, but I'm going to make it two, and there will be a question. The first one in, just going back to the points about previous purchases, I wasn't here either. I don't know how I would have voted previously, but I do know that the people that purchased, that owned the square, had made it very clear that they were going to take their money and they were going to put the lexicon. The lexicon looks really nice. The town that we have now would not look like it is now if we hadn't have bought it. Okay, they were going to let it go rack and ruin. Also, just a second point apart on that, there was a task and finish group which was paid for by this council, which was put through by the then opposition leader, and we went deeply into the purchasing of the square, and that report came back and said it might have been at the top end of the purchase, but only a little bit, and actually they could see nothing else wrong with that purchase. We all know that when you buy property, it's only worth as much as it's worth on the day you buy it, and then when you sell it. Hopefully there's no intention to sell the square, and in X amount of years' time, when the money has been paid off and the asset is still there, we will hopefully see I may not still be a councillor at that time, to be fair. So my question to you is, I know that obviously one of the high levels of income is from property, and I know from previous figures, I might have been at the portfolio report, I can't remember, but I know that the business rental was actually quite good from what I remember, and the retail rental was not necessarily as high. I couldn't find it in here, and there's lots of figures, so I might be missing it. What is the property portfolio currently looking at as far as the money side of things goes? Thank you.
It appears that Councillor Ashbury wishes to respond to that, so off you go.
I have a couple of other points, if I may, with your indulgence, as we are making statements as well as asking questions. I've been through this paper several times in the past week, and it paints a rather disappointing picture of where we are. And just to pick up on something that Councillor Mulvaginam said, there are 35 councillors who voted in favour of this budget. I missed it, put my hand up, I missed that, what he flagged, as did 34 other councillors who voted. So I think we should all take some responsibility for not being able to pick that up. But just to come back, this council now is sat with debts of £177 million. And the council was debt-free in 2015. So the purchases and the investments, for whatever decisions were made, have caused us to have that debt. It's now becoming clear, as we get published and audited accounts, that interest has been understated throughout the period since 2019, not just this year. This is becoming clear. Now, last year, during the election campaign, when I was knocking on people's doors and talking to them and saying that we wanted to bring transparency to these types of purchases, I kept being told my councillor is publishing on social media saying that the investments in Camberley Town Centre are actually good investments. They're making money. They may not be worth what they quite were when they were bought, but on a day-to-day basis, they're making money. Even last year, at one point, when pushed in this chamber, the leader even concurred that based upon the information he was given at the time, that looked like a fact. Now, when I look in these numbers now, and I'll come to my question in a minute, when I look at these numbers, the current year projected interest cost on that £177 million debt is £6.5 million. That's on page 9, if anyone wants to have a look. The MRP associated with that £177 million of debt is £2.674 million. Now, I'm not an accountant, but I can add those two numbers together to give me £9.174 million of total debt financing costs for this council this year. Now, when I look a bit further on there, and I look at the property and economic development line, which is where we make a profit from our property, I see we got a net revenue income of a whisker over £4 million. Now, in my world, that's a delta of over £5 million between money we are making on property and debt financing, largely based upon that property. So, can you confirm whether or not my assumptions are correct, and that as a result, these investments, which on social media even recently are being heralded as good investments, that they're actually a massive drain on our council's finances? Thank you.
Thank you, councillors. I think that's an excellent answer, Councillor Ashbury. I think you summarised it perfectly. Certainly town centre is a drain, and we're spending more than we're generating in income. There are, in interest of balance, some of the industrial properties that are also doing better, providing income as opposed to net expenditure. So thank you for answering that question. Did that answer your question, Councillor Garrett?
Possibly. It would be helpful to see what the figures are for retail versus business, because we also bought businesses and which we're renting out, industrial units. So industrial units, we also bought those, which are income, have got money coming in. I know that they're usually quite Good. So it would be interesting to get a breakdown of that, not necessarily today, but...
Okay, Councillor McVarnham's got them. You'll send to him today.
Thank you very much.
I think we agreed in a previous meeting, and I can't remember when because we've had so many interruptions this year. Stop, start, with elections every 2 minutes. I think we agreed there would be a review of the property portfolio and a report brought back, similar to what was attempted for the first time last year, which gave an indication that we were, which I think Councillor Ashby alluded to, we were just had our heads above water at that point, but the projection going forward wasn't looking too good. So it's an area that we want to continue to keep a close eye on, and see that we proactively manage the portfolio going forward. Are there any other questions on this report? Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. Probably just a small question, but it's on the substance of the changes in this report about the adverse variances of about 1.4 million. The biggest one of these is on page 20 under the finance section, housing benefits. It's an adverse variance of 470,000 in year for double counting of grant budgets and loss on subsidy claim. Just because it's such a big number, can we have a bit more information on that and explanation what that means? Thank you.
Mr. Watson, are you able to help with that one?
Thank you, Leader. Ms Walford has done some analysis on those numbers, and I'll pass over to her to give the analysis.
Okay, thank you. So ultimately, one thing that we identified was we get grant from the government towards our housing benefit administration costs. The grant was double counted in there, and unfortunately it was quite a large amount, which is why this is quite a large amount. And also there was a budget for some part of housing benefit, assuming it was going to be 100% repaid, but it's not. So again, we've identified that and we factored that. So it's a double count of a grant and income that we weren't going to receive that's made that up.
Sorry, and is that just this year or has that happened in previous years?
I would imagine it's the same as in previous years. As part of the outturn reports, there would have been reduced income on that service.
Councillor Morgan.
Thank you very much. You haven't still answered the question that it was your fault with regarding the 4.1 million. We'll take it that your silence is accepted as you accept the fault. We have a problem.
So I thought the question was answered by Councillor McIntyre. I'd be more than happy to come back to that in a moment, Councillor Wagner. You carry on with your next one.
No, I've got some other points. One other point. See, when you look at this entire budget, I mean, we got 13 million left over, 13 million? 0.5. 22 million left over, yes? Has the MTFS been done, or is it being done right now for the rest of the years? And do we know where we stand in year 2 and 3? I don't want year 5, because year 5 is cuckoo land. I don't believe in MTFS for 5 years anyway.
Sorry, so your question is, are we doing the MTFS now for the future years and the projection? Yes, so I think you're aware of the timetable that we normally follow. So we are putting together the budget, which will be presented in February. Alongside that, we'll have the MTFS. Clearly, the finance team look to see what the impact on future years is, but we've got the necessary numbers that we need for this year, and we can clearly see what that means for next year. But you're fully aware of the timetable that the finance team work to and that we as a council work to in terms of publishing the MTFS and the budget.
And to come back to your first point, we had, as I've said before, and we'll say again, we had no visibility of the 2.1 million. We owned until the 12th of September. That was the first time that we started to get some insight into this variance. We, as the rest of the councillors, and I think this is what Councillor Ashby was alluding to, believed the numbers that were in the paper that we were given. As you will know as an experienced councillor, and others will know, including Councillor Garrett, and I see some others more experienced as well on the video, we are obliged to take on face value the data that we are given. It is not our job to run the spreadsheet for the officers. There is a segregation of duties. It is our duty to interrogate and to ask questions. It is not our role to do the officer's job.
Can I quickly make a comment, please? I passionately disagree with what you say. You signed it off, which means you should have gone through the papers carefully to actually put it to the full council.
Thank you, Councillor.
That's my
I've said it
statement.
twice now. We had no visibility of that number. Good. I think we'll bring this to a conclusion. Thank you, everybody, for your input. So the executive is advised to resolve that the predicted forecast for the full year outturn be noted.
It's referenced this paper. Can you, because obviously we've got P&F tomorrow, and this paper is coming to P&F, so I'm going to have as much fun as you are.
Yeah.
Can we make sure that any notes that come back from that are take consideration as well? Is that okay? Because I think that's to be noted, isn't it? Sorry.
Got now. I think you've got yours on.
Oh, sorry.
Councillor Garrett, thank you. And yes, it's worthy of note, and thank you for raising it. It's worthy of note that this is slightly the wrong way round. It's not the first time we've done this, and I appreciate your patience with that. If we could stop having elections, I think we'd all be very happy, which has caused a lot of this carnage to all involved. So yeah, we'll I'm sure the officers will try and pull that together for you. I suspect you might get a slightly easier ride tomorrow at P&F on this one, but it's really down to yourself. Okay, so just going back, the executives to resolve as stated in the paper. Are we also agreed? Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. Okay, so as you may have noticed, I took the unusual decision of fiddling with the agenda. I'd like to keep everybody on their toes, but I think everybody knows that this was quite an important topic and deserved our full energy and engagement without us getting too tired. But it has meant that Mr. Bain has been held up, so thank you very much. But I know this actual area is your specialised subject. If you were on Mastermind, it would be the Surrey Heath Council finances. So I suspect you probably enjoyed listening to the debate here and now. But we move on to public question time, and I think you've got a number of them for us. So as per the normal ritual, I think you get to read your first question. Then Councillor McIntyre reads the response for the benefit of all the people who have tuned in today, and then there's a supplementary.
Could we dispense with questions and answers and just go to the supplementary, as is the usual form?
Yeah, I'm afraid we're agreed we have to go through the process for the benefit. We have to go through the process for the benefit of anybody else that is not so lucky to have done their reading beforehand. Mr. Bain, sorry.
This is going to take a long time.
Speak quick.
Speed read. Speed read. I have to do it all the time when I'm exempting sessions.
Possible to dispense with a question on the basis the first one is an exempt matter.
We're happy to go with that one, yes, if you wish to. Yeah, so just for the benefit of the general public, Mr. Bain has asked to pass on question one because the answer that's already been given means that we can't share further details. So these notes will all be visible to the public in due course, is that correct? Yeah, so I think that's acceptable. Thank you, Mr. Bain. Question two.
Okay, question two. I'll paraphrase. The council anticipates there'll be a shortfall in parking income of £285,000.
That was very succinct. Yeah, okay. Councillor McIntyre, I think you're going to.
So the succinct answer is that the previous studies that we have seen show that demand for car parking is relatively price inelastic. Footfall decreased previously when House of Fraser and Next left the town centre. So we believe that that the shortfall is due to us following the same trends as the national picture shows.
If you follow the written answer, where clearly the indication is that price is not important in terms of the usage, has the council contemplated dramatically increasing the prices on the basis that it is confident that it will not result in fewer people parking? And conversely, or secondly, the council's major asset is the one principal retail holding. The increase in parking charges no doubt impacts on the ability of retailers to conduct their business. Does this in turn result in the inability to increase the rental income on the mall and at the same time increase the number of tenants? Would it not be, bearing in mind that this council is, to all intents and purposes, must take a measured risk and reduce the prices to see whether it resulted in higher rents and in turn a higher valuation on the mall?
Councillor Ashby, do you want to respond to this?
I'll take the first part of it. Again, I'll refer you back to Councillor Garrett's crystal ball for the second part of your question, Mr. Bain. But long and short of it, the budget was set based upon the usage of the car parks being the same number of visits as last year. When you look at all the data since pandemic, including BRC data, footfall in town centres is on the decline across the country and across the southeast where we compare. Our footfall in Camberley, irrespective of the car parks that we monitor separately, not through the barriers of the car park, is in decline. The purpose of the car parking strategy that we put in was not to squeeze every single penny out of what we could make money on the car parks. The purpose of the strategy was, after 10 years of underinvestment, was to generate enough extra income to cover the finance costs of the maintenance that we needed to do. So we're not, as a council, we're not trying to maximise profit, we're trying to provide a service, and the increases were designed to make it a better service and a better experience for our residents, not to try to extract every last penny from them.
Question 3 is the amount provided in return in respect of the short-term borrowings sufficient to ensure that the MRP charged will enable the council to repay the loan?
So our MRP is based on our capital financing requirement, and there's been also work to recalculate that and make sure it is in accordance with both best practice and is compliant with the regulations. Obviously, that will be subject to external audit as part of the financial statements. But obviously, because it's not secured against any particular asset, unless we materially change our capital financing requirement through disposal of assets, then it's going to remain at the same level. So clearly, we need short-term debt to be so that we can pay off that debt if and when required. Well, if available, if we get the capital receipts to pay that off.
Thank you for the answer. Looking at the reserves of 22 million, does the minimum revenue provision so far provided appear in that figure? Because if it does, then that would not be money available to support services.
Yeah, I'm not sure that's quite right. So the MRP will come out.
We make a provision which which clearly enables you to increase your reserves. And what I'm asking is, where does the minimum revenue provision appear in the accounts? And if it appears in the 22 million and is not ring-fenced, it would then not be able to be used to support services.
We'll come back with a written answer,
I
but
don't-
it's not in the 22 million. It's not within our usable reserves. It's not in the 22 million. It's in the capital adjustment account, isn't it? Which is in the unusable reserves.
Last question. The council is reliant on other councils in terms of borrowing nearly £80 million. To what extent, recognising that other councils might be utilising their cash reserves and therefore the amount of money available to draw will be diminished, and at the same time other councils might be introducing a risk premium when lending to councils who are in some degree of difficulty, is there a risk premium being paid by this council in terms of borrowing on the short-term inter-council market?
So the two loans within your question were taken out at the end of the financial year to enable us to obviously have sufficient cash flow. That's at a peak demand for borrowing, and therefore that attracts a premium. We borrow externally based on the status of the tax raising authority, which is underwritten by the UK government, and which has indicated no local authority owed money by another in financial difficulties would be subject to any loss. Clearly, as with any lending, any challenges around sustainability will attract a premium, and therefore, there is likely to be an increase in the rates that we are being offered at the moment. Although we can still borrow both long and short term from the UK government.
My question should have been, is this council confident that it can continue to borrow money in the inter-local authority market, either as a consequence of the market becoming smaller because councils are utilising their cash reserves, or there might be a time when councils say, I'm not lending to a particular council. Surely this is something which the risk register should recognise and account should be taken of it in the audit standards and risk committee.
Yes, completely agree with you, Mr. Bain.
It's maybe worth adding, and perhaps Mr. Watson, if you want to come in, please do so, that the government has, I think it was in the budget, recently looked at councils that are in distress, and they were charging them a premium over the Public Works Loans Board rate, but they've dropped that to whatever the rate is. So I get your point, and I think it's right, and I think Councillor McIntyre's response was very succinct as well. But as Mr. Watson keeps reminding us, the UK government ultimately will underpin public institutions, and it will do so using things like the Public Works Loans Board to provide liquidity to councils. Is there anything you want to add to that, Mr. Watson?
Thank you, Leader. No, I think you've summed it up quite clearly. Thank you.
I've been reading too many dull press releases that you send me. Thank you. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Bain. I think that's your quota, isn't it? Yeah, so you've top of the league tonight and top of the league cumulatively as well, but we look forward to welcoming other residents who want to ask this committee or any other committee.
May I just say something, sir, before I leave?
Please.
If I forgot this, I should have said this at the outset, that I think, speaking on behalf of the residents, I think that getting up to date with the accounts and particularly producing briefing papers which are clearer and more understandable, the council should be commended for that.
As I said before, we don't do the work of the officers. Councillor Wagner thinks we should be doing that as well. But so all praise, I think, goes over to Mr. Watson and Ms. Worsfold. Thank you, Mr. Bain. So, no more public questions, I think. Okay, so we move on to questions by members. Who wants to go? Item 6. Who wants to go first? Councillor White, we're up. You've out the blocks twice today.
It's a
Olympics
question
banded.
for Councillor Ashbury to do with parking in the town centre. Could we please, please, please have that woman's voice changed when she says thank you for parking? Because it gets on my nerves. As a councillor who doesn't use the council offices for parking, I go into town and I pay the parking fee, and I have to listen to that woman every time I want to punch the machine. So if there's anything that you could do about it, I would really appreciate it. Mrs. Angry from Bagshot.
I'm sure.
Thank you for your question, Councillor White, and for the bit of humour in what has, up to this point, been quite a bleak meeting. So thank you for that. I will have a conversation with the people in charge of the voice and see if there is anything that we can do. And I will get back to you after we've done our investigations. Thank you.
Please be patient, Councillor White. We don't want the CCTV to catch you thumping the machine.
It is awful. It's truly awful.
Councillor Garrett, please.
Thank you, Leader. I've got 2, so I'll give you the first one, and if you want, you can have the second one. You'll get the second one later if not. So the first one, it relates to, I'm going to have to get this acronym up because I can never remember it. I won't go into details, but I'm sure you're aware of the ASB issues on the Old Dean parade. And one of the issues that the police are having to deal with is the fact that some of the residents are drinking on the parade. Now, this is a public space protection order. That's the one I couldn't remember. And unfortunately, apparently the only sign we have is outside the co-op, which is not where they're drinking. And the police struggle to be able to enforce this, apparently because there's no signs. And we've got some lovely signs that tell us not to drop bubblegum or that, but there's no. So I was wondering, I know the Community Watch team, Safety Watch team are looking at it, but I think they might be struggling to try and figure out if they've got the money to pay for some signs. And I know we've just had a massive conversation about that, but it's something that if it's there, the police will then hopefully be able to enforce the public space protection order.
Yeah, listen, we'll take that away. I think it's my portfolio because it's community safety. Yeah, we'll take that away and have a look at it. As you know, the orders are in place across lots of different places. We went through that, I think, last year. I wasn't aware that you had to have a sign up everywhere that something is going on for it to be valid. I think that might be a bit of a excuse. So we'll look into that and how we can help facilitate that, because I think we're all aware of that. Probably some of us are more aware than we were before, having visited Old Dean quite a lot recently. So yeah, thank you for the question, and we'll take a note of that and come back.
I was going to say you've spent a lot of time on the Old Dean recently, so you probably noticed it. So the second one is accent related, but not about complaints from residents that actually have accent housing this time. And looking at the Chief Exec, and he knows exactly what I'm going to be talking about. I have had 2 issues in the last 2 or 3 weeks where there are sites that are on the Old Dean where Accent are using them as, they're wasteland effectively, but they're using them as sites. One of them was a very small site which backs onto someone's garden, which has suddenly, 4 white containers have suddenly appeared which are higher than her fence, and she is not best pleased. I've sent the enforcement team out, and apparently they're not breaking any laws. The skips that turn up to pick up the rubbish and the cars that were blocking a garage this morning, she is not happy with. And I've reported it to Environment and Health, and they're also on it. The second case was the Chief Exec happened to be on the Old Dean on Friday, and there was a previously spoken about container which had a generator in it, which was right hard against someone's fence. The generator was on, diesel was pouring out, and it was pouring out into his garden, and his grandchildren were over. He was not best pleased, and apparently there was an altercation. I had already reported that as well, but apparently they're not breaking any laws. So my point is, I will very soon be writing a typical Miss Councillor Garrett email to Accent, but I would like, if possible, it maybe not me that writes it and someone else does, to suggest that it would be really good if they can improve their customer service, speak to the residents before they do such stuff. Not that it'll make them happy, but the residents are not happy. And even if they were to put fences in front of the containers, and I know the Chief Exec's seen them, it would make perfect sense to put fences in front of them so they can't see them. So just a little bit of customer service from Accent, which I know they struggle with at the best of times, but when it's not even their customers that they're upsetting, it's a problem. So I say I was going to write an email, but maybe if it could come from someone else, it might make more sense.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. Happy to take this one. Thank you, Councillor Garrett. Yes, I've experienced firsthand the issues there are around some of the welfare facilities and the containers within the compounds that you're talking about. Certainly we'll look at them from an environmental health perspective if they're causing a particular nuisance. I think the most logical thing is for us to have a conversation with the new Chief Executive from Accent, who reassuringly was on Old Dean on the first day of a new job within Accent, which I hope is an ongoing commitment to the borough. And to the housing stock they have here as well. I'm quite happy to write to Mr. Apatroe to ask him to try and resolve these in an informal way so that we don't have to take formal action if we are able to.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Garrett, for raising. Just to confirm, this is all to do with refurbishment, isn't it? So there's no planning permission.
Yeah, so it's basically temporary. But and actually, the point that's the point I did make, and I was a little bit sarcastic with the planning team. But temporary in this instance is 5 years. And I think the lady was quite rightly a little bit upset to find out she's going to have 4 containers in the back of her garden for 5 years.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's and it's. I think it's not as if they're short of bits of land. Maybe there is in the Old Dean that they own. So maybe there's a smarter way they can do it, which will work for the residents. So yeah, happy that we picked that one up. I think we've got a meeting quite shortly with them, haven't we? End of the month, apparently. Good. Okay, I think Councillor Wilson, you were next.
Thank you. Surrey County Council are planning to close the family support programme. Can you explain the position and the effect this will have on families in Surrey Heath, please?
Well, our understanding is that the programme will be closing. I am aware, and others are probably aware, I've written an open letter to Councillor Oliver, Leader of Surrey County Council, expressing our disappointment with the way that this has been managed. They are well within their rights to decide how they perform their services and who their partners are and everything else. What I think we feel as a council is that it should be done in a way that's respectful to the residents and the vulnerable families, and also to the staff involved in this dedicated service. And we shouldn't be inflicting costs on each other, unnecessary costs. So it's more about the process rather than necessarily the outcome. But I don't know, Lisa, did you want to add anything on this one? I'm so close to it, I got a bit passionate there and answered it myself. I apologise.
No, you promised me that you would let me answer any questions on this as well. I don't have much more to add to that, really. So, as Councillor MacDonald said, we were notified in October that family support would cease to be provided by Surrey Heath Borough Council from the 31st of March. What is, I think, reassuring, as you will have seen in the open letter that Councillor MacDonald issued this week, there are some very detailed discussions ongoing. We don't know what that final position is going to be, but I can trust the leader and our chief executive to take those discussions forward. But what I would like to do just at this moment is to just thank the staff that are currently working in the family support team. Working with vulnerable families is a very difficult job. It's a job that you don't leave when you close your office door. And I think that the uncertainty around their positions at the moment is very, very difficult. And I think it's a great shame that we're in the position that we're in. And I just would like to thank them for their continued dedication and commitment to their roles. Over the last 11 years, they've put in a sterling shift, and they should be commended for that.
Yeah, I've actually heard that firsthand from people who use the service, that how hugely appreciated the staff are, and they're loved by the people they help, so they definitely deserve better. But I just wanted to check, are you aware that a resident of my ward, Sarah Riddick, has started a petition to try and get Surrey County Council to change their mind and to save the family support programme? Thank you.
I was aware, and I've supported the petition. As I said, notwithstanding the fact that the Surrey County Council have the right to decide how they deliver their services, it's the transition here that the process is poor. The engagement and alignment with very dedicated officers is poor, and I'm not just talking at the level that Lisa was talking about in terms of people directly supporting the families, but also those that are supporting the people that are supporting the families, so some of which are here, like Ms Kipping and others. So we can do better, and we should do better, and the public purse demands that we do better, but ultimately this is about vulnerable families being supported and not falling through a gap, which is of, at the moment, Surrey County Council's own making. So I'm active I'm actively engaging, obviously, with the internal officers and making sure that I'm representing their views in the best way I possibly can. But I'm also looking to build wider support within the other leaders within Surrey that are impacted by this, because they have the same issue, whether it be Runnymede, Mole Valley, Waverley, Spelthorne, and somebody I probably might be Woking, that we all, try and work with Surrey in the best way we possibly can to make sure these families get supported, to make sure the officers who are supporting them also get a fair deal in this process, we work together in collaboration. I've yet to know whether that will be the case or not. Councillor Garrett, please.
This has only happened twice, I think, that I can ever think of, and I'm hoping I'm not going to make I actually support what Councillor Wilson has just said, and I'm not going to make a habit of it, okay? And I will obviously support what Councillor Foynan-Cook has said. Obviously, I was previous portfolio holder. I have first-hand experience with the team. They were instrumental in what we did with the Afghan refugees when we brought the Afghan refugees to Surrey Heath. They worked outside their hours. They were working well above what they needed to do. So I will totally support the fact that they need to be here and the fact that they are now in a position of limbo. I've got to be honest, it completely passed me by. Didn't know about it, so I'm glad it was brought up tonight. And I will do everything in my power. Not that there's a lot. I mean, I know we've talked about that a lot this evening, but I don't know I can do a lot, but I will happily support anything we can do to support that team. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Garrett. We appreciate your support. Potentially, starting with a couple of your county council colleagues, friends, would be useful. In the meantime, myself and Mr. Stevens will again address it with colleagues on Friday in a constructive way. But in the meantime, very much echo what Lisa said, which is the teams are doing a fantastic job in difficult circumstances. And maybe Ms. Kipping, you could take that back. Our thanks to them for that. Okay, other questions? I'm afraid I lost track of hands. Going once. Going twice. Gone? Okay. Right, we move on to item 7. Would you like to introduce?
Thank you, Leader. Ward Councillor grants, Community Fund grants and emergency food and fuel. Recent reports have identified that the financial sustainability of the Council is at risk, and councillors and officers must work together to identify savings to the base budget. We have a duty to residents to examine all spend and identify and reduce or remove those that do not have a wide impact on residents. Ward Councillor grants are provided to each councillor to spend supporting local causes. The maximum spend in any one grant is £500, with a total yearly spend per councillor of £1,000. In the last 2 years, we've tightened up policy to ensure that spend really benefits residents and meets the strategic aims of the Council. We also reduced the amount each councillor had available to them to spend, as we were aware that many councillors were not really using the grant facility. This report identifies that spend has been lower than expected in the last financial year since our policies were tightened and spend has reduced. This is despite the grants being communicated to councillors and available on the website. The Executive agreed that should there be surplus budget at the end of the calendar year, any councillor could use it. However, we're now recommending that to support the finances of the Council, that surplus budget is returned to make an in-year saving and that this is removed entirely from the budget going forwards until such a time as the Council can balance its budget. Due to the urgent need to provide in-year savings in order to become more sustainable, it's proposed that no further applications for ward councillor grants are accepted. The relatively small amount of the ward councillor grant is such that it's unlikely to have severe impact on organisations if it is withdrawn. They should remain sustainable without access to the grant. Those that have been sent in and are still under consideration will be reviewed with me as the portfolio holder for a decision to be made whether to allow them or not. Any grant applications that have been outstanding for more than 6 months and are not yet completed will be rejected. Turning to community fund grant applications, ceasing applications for these will improve the base budget and also return much needed funds to reserves. There's an application in hand and I'm happy to recommend that this comes to Executive as normal for consideration. To allow for the larger amounts awarded on organisations by this fund, I'm prepared to amend the resolution slightly to state that whilst we close the application process on our website, we continue to consider applications received for the rest of the calendar year, at which point we'll return the remaining fund to reserves and formally close applications. Finally, with reference to the emergency food and fuel grants, I'm aware that the majority of this spend happens in winter. This fund supports the most vulnerable in our community, and I'm aware of the continuing impact of the cost of living on our residents. For that reason, I again suggest that the resolution should be slightly amended to hold this fund open and on our website until the end of the calendar year. At this point, it will cease, allowing for further revenue streams to be located by external partners as needed over the 2025 summer period. I want to add that I present this paper with the heaviest of hearts. When I was elected in May 23, I never imagined that we would need to be taking these kinds of decisions. They're decisions that don't come easy. The need to make our financial sustainability the key priority of all councillors is something that is necessary, and the need to identify ways to do this that don't impact residents the most is essential. I understand, however, the impact that will have on councillors across the chamber, as well as some of the organisations we support. So I ask the Executive to consider these recommendations, and I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you. I think we understand very well your sentiments, all the Executive. Councillor Rowlands, please.
Thank you, Chairman. In a strange sort of way, this leads on our last discussion about the role of the County Council. Today we had a meeting about the St Michael's project, at which there were a County Councillor was present, and he was talking in projects involving many thousands of pounds, which he has at his disposal. The difference between what the County Council are doing and what's available for us was quite clear, although we're dealing with the same community, the same issues. But he, in terms of St Michael's and his own ward, because he's covering for David Lewis, who is ill at the moment in St Michael's, was very much apparent. So it leads nicely into the question of about these issues, this issue and this paper. The question is why these schemes are only dealt with in this sort of situation. It's a very small amount of money. When we first arrived on the council, it was £1,500. That was arbitrarily reduced to £1,000. And one has to get a feeling that perhaps the liberty that is available to members to actually working in their community to define where this money is being spent is unique and very important. Now, I understand And I think I could request to see the breakout of who is actually using this money. But in my experience, after some months of identifying the community groups, I've got quite a queue of people queue of organisations who could actually well use this money and provide an important function. We're doing the same sort of work as our county council colleagues, so we're going to have, under the terms of this proposal, no money to actually be able to respond in any way. Making a payment of the council award grant is a crucial factor in the efficient operation of the council, I would say. Implicit in this cut is drastically affecting our relationship with the people we represent. Reading the comment of the suspension and the legal position of the grant being confirmed and then withdrawn, there's a position, reading the basis of it, that some progress was made by officers to look into the validity of the grant, and then, if you like, the rug has been pulled away. And this coincided, of course, with problems about the by-election. There's all sorts of issues arising there. In terms of the actual saving, is it about 40,000? We've just heard very accurate descriptions of the amount of deficit the council is facing. This is a paltry action, because it's almost flagellating ourselves unnecessarily, because it's made such a small contribution towards the size of the deficit we were discussing. I mean, the pain of actually, in general terms, as a council, responding to this deficit would be bad enough. But why should we make it worse by the small amount? And I use the comparator of Surrey County Council and the way the county councillors operate there. Why should we make it worse for ourselves by going ahead with this? The reviewing of the situation in 2025, 26, I mean, that seems a dubious idea, looking at what we've heard tonight about the perspective of where the debt and dealing with the debt is going to actually operate. So I think it's very necessary that we reconsider this. I would say, if we're unsatisfied by the number of wards where the councillor does not make use of this provision, if we could look at a global amount of money, not the 40,000, but a reasonable amount of money, and that could be bid for on the basis of the officers making a decision where the person comes up with a valid claim or valid proposal to use it in their ward. This seems to me a far better proposal. One of the problems may have been that, okay, the money was the £1,500, £1,000 was made available just on that basis. But if anybody bidding for that money had to provide the background of why they were bidding for it, it would find a basis for it actually to work. To keep if you like, the accountant size of the council happy, it would be a global sum, and justification would have to go with a proposal to spend the money.
Could we let the executive member respond? Is that okay? Yeah? Thank you. Could we let Lisa respond? Yeah?
Thank you, Councillor Rowlands. I feel your pain and your anxiety around losing this fund, and I share it. I have been very privileged to be able to approve ward grants within my ward and see the benefit of that. So this is not a decision that has, or a recommendation that we're bringing forward with any ease. You talk about it being a small amount of money. £35,000 is quite a substantial amount of money to me. And although it may seem like a drop in the ocean, all of us on the executive, every portfolio holder, has been asked to find savings wherever possible. And unfortunately, this is one of those savings that I have found. And it's a difficult one. I think it's critical. You asked about reviewing and why we're reviewing in 25-26. I think it's absolutely critical that we do review it because this is such a painful decision to take. And the hope is that we may be in a better position, having gone through some savings, some other savings, and we may be able to offer something, perhaps like you had mentioned. But it is a case of watching and waiting. We have to see where our financial position lands.
Thank you. I think it's also fair to say that there are some other pots of money still accessible that the officers will be happy to signpost to. And I think there are a number, as we've discussed in this chamber before, of charities and trusts related to the borough where potentially money can be accessed as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Leader. That's the case. And we have a wonderful community team here who will work with any organisation who find themselves in any difficulty. And we're very, very happy to support in other ways. So we can signpost, we can advocate, we can help in terms of business planning and sustainability planning. We can help with those things. So there are lots of other ways to support organisations other than giving small grants out.
Thank you. Councillor Garrett, before your arm falls off, because you've had it up for a while.
It's all right. I'm fine. Thank you, Leader. Thank you. And what I'm going to say will come as no surprise to you. One thing I did pick up on was the fact that there hasn't been a large uptake. Firstly, I know from my own group that two of the guys have the most problems struggling to give away the money, and pretty much like yourself, I could spend mine 3 times over. I think the issue we've had this year, and I looked at it because I've actually asked a number of people to apply and realised they hadn't, so I've suggested they applied before tonight. I don't know if that means they'll get through or not. But out of the 33 weeks we've had this year, if you allow for 3 elections and 3 purdas, there's 18 weeks where we've been in purda. Now, most people know within that period, and I must admit I've not signposted people within that period because I know it's off. So of the 33 weeks, 18 weeks we've been in purda. So I've not pushed to get those people to get the money in. Otherwise, they would have had it in by now. Okay. I know that's not the case of all wards. It's always been the case. We've been talking about history tonight. In the history, when we set it up, there were always wards that just didn't spend it, okay? And I appreciate that. Unfortunately, there are some wards, like our own, that really do want, that could really use it. So my plea to you is, firstly, St Martin's contacted me because the emergency food and fuel thing has not happened. So I said, well, I can give you some of my Council Ward grant funding because they need it right now because of, we know we're coming to the warm hub situation. Obviously, that's now in danger as well. So what I would ask is, and I know it's a difficult decision, we've had that conversation, so we're not going to go over that tonight, that anything that might already be in place for those wards that hopefully we know it's going to do some good, that are seriously considered to be accepted. And I get that you're going to pause it until whenever you pause it. I do like the idea that Councillor Rowlands has come up with, if there was a smaller pot of money, because I'm pretty sure within their ward, our wards, that would likely to be something that can be used. So I would just urge you, I know you're making a difficult decision, and I know it's a difficult decision for you as portfolio holder. I would just urge you for maybe the grants that have already been put in for those worthy organisations, that maybe these can be considered. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Garrett, and I know you understand how difficult this is, so I appreciate your understanding. Just by way of reassurance, any applications that we've received will go through the process, and I can confirm that St Martin's is under consideration at the moment, so you can feed that back to Reverend Chris. Okay.
And just before I go to Councillor Thorne, Councillor White, it's also worth saying that in that amendment that you raised, we're suggesting that the relevant grants for things like warm hubs, etc., would stay open until the 31st of December. So I'm happy to suggest, and clearly we have financial difficulties and everything else, we've covered all of that. I'm happy to suggest to members that you go back and see where the needs are, and it's not everywhere because we know there are some other hubs that have been provided through other organisations. I think Surrey has announced its hubs are now open or opening shortly, including in my patch, Lightwater Library, on the, whatever it is, 3.5 days a week it's open. So there are things available. Let's look where the gaps are. You know who the usual suspects are that will probably come for it. Give them a nudge, and we'll look at it in due course and keep that open. And that at least gets us through this winter. And I think we'll all hope that not only will next year be better for all concerned, but we won't have any elections. I know we're going to have an election, aren't we? Councillor White, I think you were next.
It's on a similar vein to Councillor Garrett, really. I have two organisations in Bagshot who put in their application a couple of weeks ago and didn't think there was any hurry because I hadn't seen these papers, so I didn't know this was going to happen, so I couldn't advise them to sort of get them in any sooner. And they've put them in good faith, and I just hope that they've got them in time. And I've had the email from Breeder to do I authorise it and all of that for both of them. And I would just ask that these are looked at, and otherwise, I shouldn't say it, I don't suppose, but I'll be funding one of them out of my councillor's allowance if we don't, because otherwise we just have to cancel an event in Bagshot if we can't get the loan. And I'm all done out now with giving money to Bagshot. So.
Thank you, Councillor White. Sentiment noted. Oh, sorry. Yep, please. I didn't spot your eye. Sorry.
Just to let you know that those applications are under consideration as well. So they haven't been discounted. They are in on time and they will be considered. I don't know what the outcome of them will be. Obviously, when we look at applications, we measure it against certain criteria, and that is about supporting the most vulnerable in our borough. So we'll come back to you in due course about both applications, and we will let you know in the usual way.
Councillor White.
In due course, have you any idea of the timeline? Because it depends, you know, where they get other funding from, if they can.
It'll be this week, so it's within the usual timeframes, but my understanding is that for you it will be, for your applications it will be this week.
Yeah, maybe just a reminder for those of us that are blessed by parishes that might be another source of funds as well. So it's always worth approaching the parish councils who may have a stronger balance sheet than ours in places. Councillor Thorne, please.
Thank you, Leader. I came into the meeting today with a slight concern, well, no, not a slight, but quite a big concern, reference the potential closing of the emergency food and fuel applications, but it is comforting to hear, but obviously that will hopefully remain open for the foreseeable future. I think especially with the winter fuel allowance being scrapped for potentially 15,500 pensioners in Surrey Heath alone, so thank you for that one. That's all for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thorne. Yeah, and I think we all take on board, all the executive take on board the comments from Councillor Rowland and yourself and others, that we do need to see what, if anything, we can do, but equally we need to, in the short term, steady the ship, see where we are through the budgeting process, which, as Councillor Mulvagnan knows, will be kicking off shortly, and seeing where we end up out of that process into the midterm with the best information available that we have and the best insights the officer team can give us. So I propose we move on from this item. So are the council, try again. Are the executive happy to resolve as documented? We agreed?
Agreed.
With amended. Thank you. Would you like to raise a point of order on that, Councillor Rice, or you're okay on that? Right. Okay. Right. Okay. Don't use all your cards too early yet. Right. So if we move on to local community fund bids, item 8, which I think is Councillor Ashbury.
It is indeed, thank you, Leader. As all members are aware, SIL money is collected from the building of new developments within the borough and is used for funding small capital infrastructure projects to benefit those local areas where the developments are situated and the wider borough. There are 2 rounds of bidding each year for projects under this scheme, and this evening's applicants are from the first round of bidding for this financial year, which occurred in July. As it says in the paper, the bids recommended for approval are £3,206 for Frimley Phoenix Cricket Club, £2,500 for Mitchett Bowls Club, £45,000 for the replacement of equipment at Lowman Road Playground in Mitchett, and £2,244 to the Mitchett Community Association. All of the backing information, supporting information is in the paper, and I would recommend that these be approved.
Thank you, Councillor Ashby. Councillor Rise, I think, was up first. Sorry, you were out my eye line, but a bit of variety as well. Yeah.
My apologies, Leader. I should have declared a non-pecuniary interest on this item at the beginning. I have been a active supporter of item 3, for the Lowman Road playground, and as you can see, 2 of the other are within my ward as well. But I come to this meeting with an open mind.
Okay, duly noted. Is that okay? Thank you. Councillor Garrett, please.
Thank you. It's actually not, it is related to this, but it's not related to any of these specifically, other than the fact that in my own ward, for the last 2 years since we fitted the playground, I've been trying to get an extension to a fence around the mugger. Because since it was put in, balls kicked by very good football players kick them and they go into the playground, and they almost, on a number of occasions, have almost taken out some little children. I spoke to the team and I was told we've got no funds to do this, and it's going to, so I got some quotes so I could look at what the cost implications of it are, and it's 4,500 excluding VAT. So I'm a little bit upset, I suppose, because hey, there are so many funds, and I've been doing this long enough. I know I should know about all the funds available. I know about SIL funding. I've got to be honest, I didn't think they would be able to fund something like that. But we've had to try and find funding from somewhere else. Now, unlike other things discussed tonight, these are funds that are there, and they're SIL, and I understand why they're there. Although I'm a little bit confused, the £45,000 that we're now suggesting goes to the capital programme, I'm guessing that's another pot of money. That's not SIL funding. Okay, so it'd be interesting to understand that one in a second. But so my point is, I've still got to do these fences. Am I able to apply for SIL funding for these fences? When I say fences, it's basically it's extension to the top of a fence that's already there. And if I am, then that's something I would maybe look at doing for the next funding. But I would like a clarification, because I was told that there is no funding available.
So I'll try to take them bit by bit. Obviously, there are criteria for SIL funding, which is on the website. Off the top of my head, my guess, without looking into detail, is it sounds like outdoor play activity may be something that would qualify. So I don't know is the honest answer immediately, but it's a similar, I can see why you've brought it up, similar to what's going on at Lowman Road. So it may be worth looking into. The next funding round doesn't open until January. So in January, by the time we get to January, we can have had a conversation and look at that. My understanding, and this is where I look to the finance team, because of the size of the money, the £45,000, although it is coming from SIL, it is still capital, and it is of a size that needs to go to be approved at council. Is that correct? I look to the team behind me, and I'm getting nods. So it's coming from the SIL reserve, so it is SIL money, but it has to be approved at full council. All right, thank you.
And maybe it's worth commenting, so we talked about various reserves earlier, that is separate to the other reserves we were talking about, the 22 million, and is even more ring fenced. It's got extra high fencing around it. Councillor Rise.
Thank you. What I would just ask if Councillor Garrett could just because this would probably start off with me with regards to Parks and Leisure. So if you could bring it, and I can happily bring that up with the leisure team, because it may have just, in responding to you initially, they may have already assessed a criteria which would have kind of discounted it. I'm happy to take it away with officers and then kind of advise for further kind of steps.
Thank you. I'll sort you an email. Thank you.
Yeah, and maybe because you raised it, Councillor Garrett, I think that there are genuine opportunities for community improvements linked to SIL. So the councillors here are all the eyes and ears of their communities. So we look forward to you bringing forward those proposals because that money is there to be used, albeit used wisely. Any more questions on that one?
I just think if you send the details through to Stephen in Gavin's team, then that would be able to have a look and see whether that would satisfy the criteria as well. Yeah.
Help you. Yeah, good result. Any more issues on questions? No, we're all good. Okay, so executive, were we happy with the resolution as it stands? Paper? Yeah, agreed. Okay, we drift on. TPO, Task and Finish Group. I think that must be you again, Councillor Ashbury.
It certainly is. Thank you for that, Leader. So, kind of third bite of the cherry for this paper. Task and Finish Group was set up in response to the petition that was reviewed at full council regarding the Wellington Park area TPO. Task and Finish Group reported back to exec in July and were asked to go away and do some more work to look wider than just Wellington Park, to look at all areas, all wards in the borough that had area TPOs. This paper is a recommendation from the Task and Finish team in terms of how to address the whole borough challenge of area TPOs. I can no longer support this recommendation given the unfolding financial challenges faced by this council and the likelihood that we will have to make some tough decisions to potentially cut services in other area. And I think it would be irresponsible to add this ongoing cost to the revenue budget. I would propose we amend the proposal here to say we defer this work until a point when the head of planning feels there is sufficient capacity within the team to carry out this work without having to recruit extra resources.
Thank you, Councillor Ashbury. Questions on this one? Councillor Garrett, and then we'll go Councillor Thorne.
I will probably not put this as well as Councillor Cope. Unfortunately, he's not here tonight, and I'm sure you will not be surprised. So, obviously, I know he's not happy, and we've got to be honest, in view of what was coming down the line and the previous meetings and the paper tonight, it has come as no surprise that the funding is not available. It's a little bit disappointing, and I think probably the biggest disappointment, and I know we've discussed at length this evening the money, that once again it seems to be a petition from the public that we yet again are not doing anything about. Now, I appreciate we have done something about it, but we're not doing something about it. So I wonder if in light of this, and I'm sure Councillor Cope in the chamber at another time will obviously ask some questions, but I wonder if we need to pause the petitions in view of what you're saying, because there will be a number of petitions when they come that will have a monetary value on them. Yes? Because that's the nature of the beast. And if we're saying that we haven't got the money for this, which is obviously for the residents that have signed it, that's really important to them, I do wonder if we need to really consider the petition moving forward, because we're not going to be able to fund any of these requests. I'm just throwing it out there, shooting from the hip, but obviously it is really disappointing, and I'm sure Councillor Cope will say something in future, and I'm sure Councillor Thorne will want to say something.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Garrett. To be honest, I haven't thought about that. I don't know whether the other members of the executive have either. I think it would need a lot of thought, especially in the context of some of the challenges we think we're going to have going forward. We need to keep ourselves accessible to the residents, and you know, whilst Mr. Bain is a regular visitor and very welcome. It's important that other residents also have the opportunity to do that, whether it be through public speaking or whether it be through petitions. There will be things that we can do that don't cost so much money. Off the top of my head, I can't think of any, but there are things we can do. I mean, for example, somebody could have raised the family support program through a petition, and what you're going to do about it, and can you help us, kind of thing. And we would have said, yeah, absolutely, we're behind that. So we'll give that some thought. It's an interesting observation. What I can say, and I hope Councillor Cope will take me on my word, is that I know Councillor Ashbury, myself, and the other executive members went into this in good faith to try and see what we could do for a legitimate resident concern. Unfortunately, and obviously the Task and Finish group that was led by Councillor Ashbury, people worked on it and it took up officers' time as well. So all that was done in good faith. But equally, we have unfortunately come to a dead end on this one, albeit that Councillor Ashbury has alluded to. We will look at it when time and resources allow, and potentially some money. So I know from conversations within the council, I think there's some upskilling of various officers done, which might, or is being done, that might create some more capacity to do tree-related work. Whether that will free up Mr. Chinner's resource, I don't know, a little bit more. We'll just have to wait and see how that goes. But we understand where the residents are coming from. It's a legitimate point that they raised, and as Councillor Ashby say, we will put it on hold. It doesn't necessarily mean it can't come back. But thank you for your observation around the petitions. We'll take that one away, and I'll discuss with my learned colleague on my left-hand side. Councillor Thorne.
Thank you, Leader. I'm very conscious that the residents within Wellington Park for years have spoken about their fears, to be honest, with a lot of the trees which are around there. There are some which I've seen which are virtually leaning at an angle like that over people's properties, but have been deemed as being safe, much to the disagreement of many residents. There's also been numerous trees in the last year which have had branches falling off, and I mean large branches which could take someone out if they had been walking underneath. Is obviously taking into account obviously what you've said this evening, is there anything we can do that, whether that be looking at the trees within Wellington Park with a green space team to see where things can be potentially trimmed back within accordance with the TPOs, because I'm conscious as we're tied to the legality of those TPOs of how much we can do, but if there is something we can do just to go around with a green space team, I think that would be hugely appreciated in the short term. Thank you.
I think there's a couple of answers to that, Councillor Thorne. First of all, and I'll stand to be corrected by Mr. Chinner if I get it wrong. The trees that are owned by the council, that are covered by the TPO, obviously the Green Spaces team inspect them on a regular basis, and if they are deemed to be unsafe, they would go through the process of making them safe. I think it's fair to say on Wellington Park there are a significant number of trees that are in private ownership, in people's gardens, etc. And I would suggest that if anyone has any major concerns, that they put a tree works application into the tree officer, who will then come out and take a look. This isn't about protecting trees at all costs. This is about protecting trees which are an asset to the area and not pruning them or chopping them down unnecessarily, but where it is creating a major problem to a highway or a footpath or anything like that, obviously that will have to be taken into account. If there's anything I've missed, I'll pass on to Mr. Chinner.
I think, Councillor Ashbury, you've answered that question very well. I think in terms, just to add, the tree works application is a free service. There's no chargeable service for that because we can't charge because we serve the CPO on those properties. So, as Councillor Ashbury has said, an application should be made to the council and we'll assess it accordingly.
And I think we'd appreciate councillors' support in getting that message out. Obviously, Councillor Cope has been campaigning on this within your own area, and I think it's important that residents are as informed as possible. So if there are things that need looking at, and I know Mr. Chidder probably won't thank me for this because there'll be a pile of work coming his team's way, but if it's appropriate work, then it needs to be looked at from a safety and integrity point of view. So yeah, let's get the message out that if things need to be looked at, they need to be looked at. Okay, but we can't do what was anticipated, which was the whole area review and other areas potentially further down the pipeline. Okay, anything else on this one from anybody? The colleagues on the video are very quiet today. Good, okay, so in that case, are we happy to, I guess, agree to your amended resolution? Have I got the terminology right, people? Yes, okay. And you managed to capture it, did you? Yes. Okay, good. So are we agreed with what Councillor Ashbury proposed? Mm-hmm. Agreed. Thank you. Okay. Yeah, having had to leave a house at 3 a.m. in the morning because a lime tree was taken out of a garage, I have some sympathy with the residents on this particular issue, amongst others. Right. Building control partnership. It's your lucky night, Councillor Ashbury. I think that's 3 in a row, isn't it?
That's 3 in a row. Right, thank you for that, Leader. So, over the past 2 years, Surrey Heath have been working jointly with Runnymede Borough Council to try to build a building control partnership between the two councils with a view to improving efficiency and resilience within both authorities. And during this time, been operating with one shared manager across both councils. It was proposed earlier this year to make the temporary arrangements permanent with a transfer of staff and alignment of IT systems, which would have necessitated some set-up costs, which it was proposed to be split 50-50 between the two councils. Due to these costs, Runnymede Borough Council have decided they do not wish to progress to make this a permanent partnership, and so the temporary arrangements have now been brought to an end.
Any questions on this one? I see some conferring, so we'll pause. Councillor Garrett.
I was just reading this. I was trying to make sure I hadn't missed something. So there was a shared member of staff. So what happens to that member of staff?
That member of staff has now returned to her previous position within this council.
Was it not successful? I mean, do we know why they don't want to do it? Do they give any real reasons?
I'll let Mr. Chinier give the detail, but my understanding was with the set-up costs that they would have to incur, they didn't feel that the juice was worth the squeeze, in a nutshell, but I'll let...
Thank you, Councillor Ashbury. Yeah, so, yeah, you are correct. In 1.4 of the report, on page 50, it gives you the reasons why it wasn't successful. It was basically, there was various on-costs which Runnymede couldn't take on. It was far too expensive for them, and they weren't able to agree to them. It went to their members as well, and it went to the senior leadership board as well for confirmation. Then they couldn't agree the actual figures. That's the reason why the partnership wasn't successful.
I think it's also worth saying that having a member of staff having to operate across two completely different systems and processes and everything else is not ideal. So a number of different factors in there. So having been alerted to the issue by Mr. Chinner, I worked with Mr. Roberts and my opposite number and his opposite number as well to try and see if we could come to a resolution, effectively stop flirting and get married. But unfortunately, it's not been possible. a more sort of policy, I guess, point is that we are looking for those kind of opportunities with, and we'll continue to look for those opportunities with other boroughs, similar to what we have with community services with Runnymede, because it is a way of keeping critical mass and giving people working within service growth as well in terms of their development. So it's good for the residents, it's good for the staff, and it's good for the finances. So it's perfectly a virtuous thing to do. So we'll keep working with our colleagues on various opportunities, and I've got one or two discussions that I'm sure Mr. Stevens has in the background on various things. So any other questions on this one? No? Okay, so is the executive happy to note this update? Agreed? Okay, very good. Listen, thanks very much everybody for your attendance today and your contributions, and to the officers and others that have been involved in preparing these reports, and obviously the executive members preparing for their individual sessions. Thanks very much.